Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. For today's discussion, I have chosen the articles from the international edition of the Hindu because we had many more interesting articles in the international edition as compared to the regular Delhi edition. So please take a look at the topics that I have chosen. These are the 10 topics that we are going to discuss today. We have 4 important articles that are relevant for both mains and prelims examination. And we have 6 small articles that can be very important for our prelims. So let's analyze all these topics one by one. And let's ensure that it's a detailed, comprehensive discussion so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking these initiatives, do support us with your likes, with your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So before we start, there's a small announcement. As part of the Holi festival which is coming up, we are providing a flat 50% discount on our IAS courses with a 6-month free extension. So you can make use of the offer to enroll for the English online classroom program. You can contact the number that is provided over here. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the first article from page number 1. On the front page, there is a big development which has been reported. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has visited Bhutan and several important agreements have been signed between the two countries. In fact, recently, Bhutan's Prime Minister, Tshering Tobe, also had visited India and important initiatives were announced between the two countries. So just a few days back, on the 15th of March, we had actually carried out a detailed analysis of India-Bhutan relations with focus on the Gelufu Mindfulness City project, which Bhutan is promoting in order to boost its economic growth. So we discussed what role India can play in assisting the development of the Gelufu Mindfulness City and how it could bring India-Bhutan much closer. So if you haven't watched the video, please go back and watch the Hindu analysis of 15th March, where we have conducted a detailed analysis of this particular development. So now, let's continue this discussion. Let's take a look at India-Bhutan relations and what developments have been reported following the Prime Minister's visit. Now, it's been announced that India is going to double its financial assistance to Bhutan. This is the biggest development to come out of the Prime Minister's visit. In fact, that is the headline of the article as well, that India is going to double its financial assistance to Bhutan to 10,000 crores. So there is something very interesting that we need to observe here. Because see, usually in the past, Indian prime ministers have avoided any foreign visits after the elections have been announced. Because the model code of conduct kicks into effect, which is implemented by the Election Commission of India, right? And once general elections are announced, usually prime ministers don't travel abroad. They don't conduct any bilateral visits, and more importantly, they don't make any announcements with financial implications. Because this could go against the very spirit of the model code of conduct which would be in place. But this is a unique instance. Prime Minister Modi has traveled to Bhutan and even announced a big financial assistance after the elections were announced, after the model code of conduct was in place. This highlights the importance of India-Bhutan relations. According to reports, the Ministry of External Affairs had obtained a special permission from the Election Commission. The MEA, which was mindful of the impact and the consequences, had approached the Election Commission asking for special permission because India-Bhutan relations are strategically very, very important, especially given the threat that we both face from China. So there were some important initiatives that had been planned which had to be announced irrespective of elections in India. So to facilitate this visit of the PM and the announcement of some of these initiatives and the signing of some important agreements, the MEA obtained a special permission from the Election Commission to ensure that the government does not violate the model code of conduct. So now let's look at where exactly Bhutan is located, why Bhutan is such an important neighbor for India. As you know, it's a Himalayan state, it's a Himalayan kingdom, and even today it's a constitutional monarchy. There is a constitution, there is a elected government, but the king remains the head of the state. So Bhutan has a very unique society. It has a very unique economic model as well. It has a very strong belief in spirituality. It's a Buddhist majority nation, and it gives utmost importance for environment conservation and biodiversity protection. Bhutan is one of the few carbon neutral countries in the world, and it has a strong commitment for tackling climate change. It does not contribute much of emissions because it does not believe in industrial development and exploitation of natural resources. If you look at Bhutan's unique economic model, it has adopted gross national happiness as an indicator to track the measurement, to track the progress of the country in terms of happiness instead of regular GDP-based growth. So that shows how unique Bhutan is as far as its economy and society is concerned. So India has always respected this about Bhutan, and there is a lot of respect, mutual respect between the two countries, and both of them treat each other as equal partners. This has been the case since 1947. Since independence, India has cultivated very close relations, a trust-based relationship has been built, and it's one of the most unique relationships in the region. Because see, for India, Bhutan has always been very vital as far as Chinese aggression in the region is concerned. Because in 1949-1950, China started its expansionist policy and displayed aggression by annexing Tibet. So Bhutan embraced India at that point, as Bhutan was worried about Chinese aggression, and it sought defense and foreign policy assistance from India. So India-Bhutan signed the 1949 Treaty of Friendship, which became the foundation of this relationship. Bhutan even outsourced its foreign policy to India, and it agreed to be guided by India in its foreign relations. So essentially, from 1949 until 2007, throughout this period, it was India which was guiding Bhutan in its foreign policy. India guided Bhutan's foreign policy throughout this period. India also promised to defend Bhutan against any external threats. India took up a commitment to defend the country against any external threats. So this arrangement remained until 2007, when the treaty was revised and updated. So now Bhutan is no longer guided by India in its foreign policy, because Bhutan conducts its own independent foreign policy. But however, it does consult with India very closely in its foreign policy as well. But India still has the obligation to defend Bhutan against external threats, and we have very close military ties, and we not only provide military training and weapons, but even Indian troops are deployed in Bhutan. Sometimes the Bhutan-China border is jointly patrolled by Indian and Bhutanese troops. So that is the kind of relationship that has developed, and essentially India has seen Bhutan as a buffer. We have developed Bhutan as a buffer state, a state which could cushion the impact on India if there is Chinese aggression in the region. If China gets aggressive with regard to the border dispute that is present in the Himalayan belt, then states like Nepal and Bhutan are buffer states. They are sandwiched between India and China, and they can help in absorbing the impact. They can cushion the impact of any such Chinese aggression. In fact, this is a British era strategy that we had borrowed. During colonial times, British India had cultivated all the Himalayan kingdoms as a buffer against any possible Russian aggression from the north. Because colonial Britain, it presumed a threat, a military threat from then Russia. So during that period, British India had cultivated most of the Himalayan kingdoms here, including Tibet, Nepal, Sikkim and Bhutan, as buffer states, as small kingdoms in between, which could absorb any impact of any military aggression from the north. So we borrowed this strategy, and post-independence, we continued to set up Nepal, Bhutan, and even Sikkim as buffer states of India. Of course, later Sikkim merged with India in 1975. But we do follow the buffer policy, as these Himalayan kingdoms, they help in absorbing the impact of any Chinese aggression. So India maintains this close strategic defense relationship. Until 2007, we were guiding Bhutan in its foreign policy. We are still responsible for defending Bhutan against external threats. And more importantly, we have been involved in the economic development of Bhutan. Right from the beginning, Bhutan had very limited resources. So it was India which financed Bhutan's budget. India has been giving a lot of financial support for Bhutan's development. Even Bhutan had adopted the 5-year plan model, and India would finance the 5-year plans and the budgets of Bhutan. If you look at the union budget of India, every year there is a dedicated allocation made to the Ministry of External Affairs, which accounts for foreign assistance that we provide to other countries. And a significant amount of this assistance, a significant share, is assigned to Bhutan. Usually, Bhutan is the largest recipient of India's development assistance every single year. So India has been providing the required funds to aid Bhutan's development. And we even launched Project Dantak in 1960s to support the infrastructure development of Bhutan. It was a project launched by Prime Minister Nehru in 1963-64, along with the then King of Bhutan. So since then, Project Dantak has been a joint initiative where India provides the financial support and technical support, and even India executes many of the infrastructure projects in Bhutan. We have also invested heavily in the hydropower sector of Bhutan. As a Himalayan state, Bhutan has a lot of hydroelectric potential, and India has successfully established several hydropower plants. And as a result, today Bhutan is exporting electricity. It is generating surplus electricity, and it has become an exporter of power. So India purchases the surplus power to meet our own deficit, and we even redistribute this, re-export this to other deficit countries like Bangladesh and Nepal. These 4 countries present in the region, the BBIN countries, they have a power sharing arrangement as well. So the surplus hydropower generated in Bhutan is transmitted to Bangladesh and Nepal through Indian power grids. So that is the kind of arrangement, power sharing arrangement that India has created. And today this is bringing a lot of revenue to Bhutan. Also, tourism is a major source of revenue, and Indian tourists account for a significant share of Bhutan's revenue. And any time Bhutan faces any challenges or difficulties, India has always been there for the country. For example, if you take the recent pandemic, it was India which supplied the essential drugs, medicines, and even vaccines. And we played a big role in supporting Bhutan during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's the reason why Bhutan has recognized India's contribution during the pandemic, and it awarded its highest honor to Prime Minister Modi. In 2021, Bhutan had announced its highest honor, which is Order of the Druk Gyalpo. It was awarded to PM Modi. Is that clear? Bhutan has never given this to a foreign head of state or head of government. So PM Modi becomes the first foreign dignitary to receive the highest award in Bhutan. So PM Modi had not got an opportunity to travel to the country to receive the award. So this visit, which happened yesterday, has given that opportunity, and PM Modi has been awarded with the highest honor of Bhutan. It again shows the support that India gave to the country in combating the COVID-19 pandemic. So it's only natural for India to stand with Bhutan and give any kind of support that it requires. So now Bhutan has made ambitious plans for certain economic projects, especially the Gelugfu Mindfulness City project. And Bhutan wants to turn this into one of the modern sustainable cities. Bhutan wants to encourage a few sustainable industries, especially IT and services industries and education, hospitality. So such service-based industries which are non-polluting, right? Bhutan wants to promote some of these non-polluting industries in this brand new city that it is constructing at Gelugfu, which is right across the Indian border. Across the border from Assam, right? This location has been chosen to build a modern future city, right? Which would focus on non-polluting service-based industries. It is all set to become a trade hub and an industrial hub of the region, and India will be closely involved in this project. So that explains why India has doubled the financial assistance. In the previous 5-year term, from 2019 to 2024, we had provided around 5,000 crores to Bhutan in financial assistance. For the next 5 years, from 24 to 29, India has doubled the assistance to 10,000 crore rupees. Most of these funds will be channeled towards building the Gelugfu mindfulness city. So India will play a critical role in this project. This also shows how India has been supporting Bhutan historically. Over the last 7 decades, India has been the largest provider of financial assistance. For example, just look at last year's budget. This is data from 2023 Union Budget. You can see how Bhutan is the largest recipient of India's foreign assistance. Almost 2,400 crore rupees was allocated in just one financial year. Over the decade, between 2001 to 2011, during the past decade, Bhutan has received more than 32,000 crore rupees from India. So compared to any other country, even if you take Bangladesh, Afghanistan or Sri Lanka or any other country, Bhutan receives the highest financial support from India. So this is very true for this decade as well. And it shows the kind of financial dependency that Bhutan has on India. So every time Bhutan needs India's support, India is ready to provide that kind of assistance. So in the upcoming Gelugfu Mindfulness City project, India is going to play a very important role, because this project could help in driving the development of Northeast India. The project aligns with our neighborhood first policy, and it also aligns with our Act East policy. This can help bring better connectivity and better growth opportunities to Northeast India, which can further be connected with Southeast Asian markets. So Bhutan would be very interested to link the Gelugfu Mindfulness City with Southeast Asian markets as well. So this is something that aligns between India and Bhutan, and it's only natural for India to assist Bhutan in this project. So Bhutan is planning a new airport which will come up over here, and India will be playing a role in the construction of this airport for improving air connectivity. India has already announced a few important railway projects. In fact, there are around 7 or 8 proposed railway lines, and 2 projects have already been approved. One connects Kokrajhar and Gelugfu from Assam to Bhutan, and another rail route connects Banarhat and Samtse from West Bengal to Bhutan. So these 2 important rail lines have already been approved, and Indian Railways will be executing this transboundary railway project. We are also focusing on inland waterways navigation. We are going to connect India's Brahmaputra with some of the other rivers in Bhutan to establish inland navigation routes. And we are also going to improve the cross-border trade infrastructure by establishing an integrated check post, or a ICP. India has established such ICPs with some of its other neighbors. Like, for example, we have an integrated check post with Pakistan at the Wagah Atari check post. We have 4 ICPs with Bangladesh. We have planned new ICPs with Nepal, with Myanmar. So these integrated check posts that come up along the border locations, they are basically your land ports, just like you have airports and seaports. An integrated check post is a land port that will facilitate the movement of people and goods. Right? It will provide all the required services, from immigration to customs to security. All services are provided under one single terminal or one single building, so that it can help in quick processing of people and goods, and it can promote the movement of people and goods. So it basically contributes to more trade across the land borders between 2 neighboring countries. So such advanced trade infrastructure is also coming up between India and Bhutan. So now I'll show you some important maps. Please concentrate and take a look. Here you can see the proposed railway lines. Around 7 to 9 railway projects have been proposed, but 2 of them have already been approved. India will be financing this railway link, and India will be constructing this as well. So here you can see the railway link between Kokrajhar and Gelugfu. So this is where the new modern city is coming up, the Mindfulness City. It will be directly linked with Kokrajhar in Assam, which is a bordering state. The second railway line which is approved is Banerhat in West Bengal over here with Samse. So these two railway projects will improve connectivity with India, and we are planning similar railway projects linking with Assam and towards Arunachal Pradesh. So this can transform the northeast region, and the airport which will come up here at Gelugpu, along with the modern city, it can drive many opportunities for the people of northeast India as well. It could improve connectivity to northeast India, bring better opportunities to northeast India. And if we can work with Bhutan and connect the region with Southeast Asia, right, we can open up new markets and we can even drive investments towards the region. So this is the ambitious plan of Bhutan, and India is standing right next to Bhutan supporting this initiative. So that shows how important the relations are. So the last point is that during the Prime Minister's visit, some important agreements were also signed covering various sectors. In the energy sector, for example, India-Bhutan have signed an agreement for facilitating the supply of energy products, like petroleum products, basically. India is the key supplier of all essential commodities, from food to medicines to fuel. India is the primary provider to Bhutan. So a new agreement has been signed to facilitate petroleum supplies from India. India will also assist Bhutan in energy efficiency projects to achieve energy conservation in order to reduce the wastage of power and to reduce the carbon footprint. India also has signed an agreement in the field of food safety. India's Food Safety Standards Authority of India will be working with Bhutan's regulators to implement food safety and security standards. Then there is an agreement on youth and sports cooperation, an agreement on pharmaceutical standards for new drugs and medicines that are going to be developed. Then more importantly, we have signed an agreement on space cooperation. Bhutan is planning to focus on space technology, and recently we have launched a joint satellite. India-Bhutan jointly developed a satellite, and it was launched by ISRO in 2022. ISRO is also planning a tracking station in Bhutan, which can help in receiving signals from Indian spacecrafts and satellites placed in orbit, and it can help in India's future space missions. So space cooperation has become a focus area, and all these related agreements have been signed during this important visit. So this completes my discussion of the first important topic. You can expect a number of prelims questions on what we have discussed, and you can even expect a mains question in GS paper 2. So before we take up the second topic, the second article, please note that as part of the free special classes that we are running on the Unacademy app, today I will be taking up a very important session on the contribution of Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee in shaping India's foreign policy. This session will be live at 1 p.m. today. Today at 1 p.m. I'll be taking this session live, so please join me live and attend the class. It's a very important session because we will be covering some important foreign policy developments of late 90s and early 2000 when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of India. So the link for the session is provided in the video description. Now let's look at the next article from page number 3. As you all know, yesterday there was a breaking development. The Chief Minister of Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal, was arrested by the Enforcement Directorate. So following his arrest, Arvind Kejriwal has said he's not going to resign. Even his party members have said that Arvind Kejriwal remains the Chief Minister of Delhi, and he has refused to give up his position. He has refused to offer his resignation. So this article here is examining the viability of such a position. The article is asking a very important question. Can a chief minister continue in office while he or she is in custody? If a chief minister or anyone who holds an important public office, that to a constitutional office, if they have been arrested and placed in custody, right, can they continue to hold that office? Will there be any legal or constitutional implications? That is what the article is examining. So let's take a look at this, as it's a very interesting and very important discussion. See, recently, there was a similar incident in Jharkhand. The former Chief Minister of Jharkhand, Hemant Soren, was also accused of financial impropriety and was accused of involvement in money laundering and a financial scandal. So when he was facing imminent arrest, again by the Enforcement Directorate, Hemant Soren resigned. He offered his resignation first so that the office of the Chief Minister is not tarnished. He offered his resignation, a new CM was appointed, and then the ED arrested Hemant Soren. But in the case of Arvind Kejriwal, this has not happened, right? Of course, the very fact that whether the case is genuine or not, is there a malified intention in misusing ED to target opposition leaders? That's a different argument altogether. I'll come to that point as well, because that is the focus of an editorial today. Today there's an editorial that focuses on the misuse of central agencies like Enforcement Directorate. So that is another side of the story. But here the question is, even if there is an allegation, and if someone who's holding a public office has been arrested, right, by a law enforcement agency, is it viable for them to continue retaining that public office? That is the question. So in a similar incident recently, Hemant Soren, who was the CM of Jharkhand, he offered his resignation, resigned from the position, and then ED moved to arrest the former CM. But in the case of Arvind Kejriwal, he said, I will continue working from jail. I will not step down, but I'll continue working from jail. So the question is this position viable? So let's take a look at this by examining some important observations and judgments of the Supreme Court and few high courts. There have been cases in the past that have dealt with this topic, and let's make use of that, and let's take the help of these judicial observations and judgments, and based on that, let's have a discussion on this. See, here the problem is that if someone who's holding an important public office, it could be a cabinet minister, chief minister, prime minister, or anyone, right? If they face these charges, whether it's proven or not, that's secondary. That is handled by the courts, that is handled by the prosecution, right? But irrespective of that, even if the charges come up, even if the allegations come up, and if someone is arrested, is it viable for them to continue holding that office? Because this will raise questions of morality. In fact, it's an important topic under ethics as well, under ethics and morality. Since they hold a very high public office, on which the people have placed their trust, their faith, right? So there are aspects of good governance, constitutional morality, which could get compromised if they continue holding their office when they are accused of such serious offenses. Whether they have done it or not, whether they are guilty or whether these are false charges, that is completely separate, right? The moment such charges are brought up and someone is facing an arrest when they are holding a high public office, usually propriety says that, morality says that they have to step down. This is out of respect to the office that they are holding, because the public have placed faith in that office. It's a constitutional high office, and those holding such high offices, they should be mindful of aspects of good governance, clean governance. They should be mindful about constitutional morality and principles of moral values. So if you look at some court observations, we will get a better idea about this. Supreme Court and Madras High Court, they have examined this particular question in different cases, and they have made some very interesting observations. So let's take a look at this. See, recently in Tamil Nadu, there was a cabinet minister who was accused of money laundering, and charges were filed against this particular minister. So this minister was arrested by ED. He continued to remain a cabinet minister, but without a portfolio. A specific portfolio was not assigned, but this concerned minister in Tamil Nadu remained a cabinet minister even after being arrested by Enforcement Directorate on money laundering charges. So a case was filed at Madras High Court. It was the Senthil Balaji versus Ramachandran case. V. Senthil Balaji was the minister in question, right? He continued holding his position as a cabinet minister in the Tamil Nadu state cabinet, but he did not have any portfolio. So he did not resign from his position as a cabinet minister even after getting arrested by ED on money laundering charges. So the litigant, Ramachandran, filed a case at Madras High Court arguing that you can't have a minister holding their office even after they are arrested. So in this case, the Madras High Court went into the issue. The litigant argued that if someone holding a high public office is accused of financial scandal or financial impropriety, then they need to forfeit the office. Doesn't matter whether they are guilty or not, even if the charges are false, even if they are innocent. To protect the sanctity of the office, to protect the trust, the faith the public have placed on that office, they have to forfeit the office. They have to step down. They have to resign. This was the argument of the litigant. Now, in this case, the Madras High Court relied upon a previous judgment of the Supreme Court that was delivered in 2014. In 2014, a constitution bench of the Supreme Court had examined a similar issue in the Manoj Narulla versus Union of India. This was again a landmark case where similar questions had come up, a similar dilemma had arisen, whether someone holding a high public office, can they continue in that office even when they are accused of serious charges, right? So here, the Supreme Court pointed out three very important points. The Supreme Court said, whether these charges are true or false, doesn't matter. Anyone holding a high public office, they should be mindful of three norms. They should be mindful of three important values. One is constitutional morality. Constitutional morality says that anyone holding a high public office, they should be mindful of the importance of that office. They should be aware that their action should not contradict rule of law. Whatever actions they carry out by holding this office or even in private, they should be mindful of the consequences and they have to ensure that they don't break the rule of law. This is an aspect of constitutional morality, especially on those who are holding constitutional high offices. Understood? Next, those who are holding these offices, they should be mindful of the importance of good governance or clean governance. In good governance, there is no scope for corruption. There is no scope for any impropriety by those holding these key offices, right? So, out of respect to good governance, the principle and value of good governance, those holding these offices, they have to step down. That's what the Supreme Court opined. And finally, there is an element of constitutional trust. Those holding these high public offices, as I told you, the people have placed faith in the office, right? It's not about the individual. It's not about who the person is. It's about the office that they are holding. There is a degree of constitutional trust placed on that office. So if they continue holding on to the office, they may denigrate the value of that office. It might erode the trust the public have placed in that high constitutional office. So because of these three norms, the Supreme Court had advised that it's better for them to forfeit the office and step down when they are accused of serious charges. The Madras High Court, which relied upon this 2014 ruling, right, it made some other important observations as well. It went into the practical aspects. Now let's say a cabinet minister or a chief minister has been arrested and they are in jail and they are not resigning. They are not stepping down. Now the point is, how will they continue their function? In the case of Arvind Kejriwal says that I will act as the CM from jail. I will continue my duties by sitting in jail. The question is it practically feasible? Are there any dilemmas and challenges that come up? That's what Madras High Court looked at. See, for example, if there is a minister or a CM in jail, and if they want to continue their function, right, if they want to perform their duties, how can they ask for government files to be brought to a jail? Right? They can't call up the chief secretary or the secretary of the concerned department and ask them to send those files to jail, because this will be a breach of their oath of office. This will breach the oath of office as it undermines the sanctity of the office that they are holding. You can't have official documents, government documents sent to prison, sent to jail. This undermines the sanctity of the office itself and breaches the oath of office that they have taken. This was a very important observation. There are practical problems in functioning as a minister or as a CM while you're sitting in jail. What about the salary? Now, if they don't perform the duty, let's say they are not working, right? Should they be paid their salaries from state exchequer, even when they are not performing the duties? This is another practical challenge that comes up. So here, if you look at the grounds of disqualification, Because we have a law called Prevention of Corruption Act, under which if elected representatives, if they are guilty of corruption, right, there are certain disqualification norms that are provided. Disqualification is part of the Prevention of Corruption Act. So there are two specific provisions here. If they apply, then obviously, right, the minister or the chief minister, whoever it is, they stand disqualified. But however, this is only when they are convicted. This is only after their conviction. Some of you might remember Jayalalitha's case. Jayalalitha, who was the chief minister of Tamil Nadu, was convicted of disproportionate assets and then jailed as well. So, under the Prevention of Corruption Act, elected representatives, they stand disqualified. For example, if they are held guilty and punished with a fine for charges of corruption, in that case, the MLA, the elected representative, is dismissed or disqualified from elections, from the MLA post as well, for a period of 6 years. There is a 6-year disqualification provided under Representation of People Act. This will violate RPA, Representation of People Act. So any conviction under Prevention of Corruption Act where there is a fine imposed on the convict, on the guilty who's been accused, right, they will be disqualified for a period of 6 years. But if they are imprisoned, if they are held guilty and if they are imprisoned as well, in that case, the disqualification is extended. They are disqualified from contesting elections for the entire term of imprisonment and for another 6 years after their release. For the whole term of their imprisonment, they stand disqualified from their post, and after they are released from jail, for another 6 years, they stand disqualified. This is what the disqualification provisions say as far as Representation of People Act is concerned. But this kicks into effect only when there is a conviction, only when they are held guilty of the crime that they are accused of. But if there are simply charges and allegations, right, it becomes a question of morality. It's up to that person to decide whether to step down or not. There is no specific law which prohibits the CM or the minister. Right? So there is a legal vacuum here, a constitutional vacuum as well. But court rulings have said that out of respect to the office, out of respect to constitutional morality, good governance, and constitutional trust, it's better that they resign, they step down, so that the office is not tarnished, so that these practical problems don't come up in day-to-day administration. So that is what courts have opined in the past. Madras High Court had said that citizens expect very high standards of conduct by those who are in positions of power. That is the kind of trust that people have placed in these high offices. So even if there are allegations, and even though there is no conviction as such, still it is better for them to resign. It's always suggested that they should step down to protect the sanctity of the office. So that is what we take away from this important article. Got it? Now there is an editorial on page number 6 that deals with the same issue. But here it's talking about the allegations against Enforcement Directorate, that it is often misused by the center to target opposition parties and opposition leaders. In fact, there have been many such instances where political leaders of opposition parties have been arrested or targeted apparently by central law enforcement agencies. And it's often accused that the ruling party at the center misuses ED and as well as the CBI and the Income Tax Department to target opposition leaders. This is not a new accusation. This has been there from many decades. From many years, it has been accused that the CBI is like a caged parrot. The Supreme Court itself had observed that CBI has become like a caged parrot, which is simply singing the tune of its master. Right? The CBI has been repeatedly accused of heavy politicization by the ruling parties at the center, and various central governments allegedly have misused the CBI to target regional parties and opposition parties to score political points. Of late, ED has acquired a similar notorious profile. It's been accused of carrying out these fake raids and raising these fake charges, right? And this has been criticized quite heavily. Apparently, data shows that almost 95% of money laundering cases and other financial impropriety cases pursued by ED, they are against opposition leaders. 95% of the cases in the last decade, right, which ED has pursued has been against opposition leaders. So this is often shown as a evidence to point out that ED is often misused by the ruling party at the center, right? The center, of course, denies the charges, but if you look at the conviction rates as well, conviction rates of ED is extremely low. Under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, even under the Foreign Exchange Management Act, the FEMA, these are the two primary laws enforced by ED. Under both the laws, the conviction rate is extremely low, which points out that either ED is not able to collect evidence to achieve conviction in court, or to begin with, the cases were false. The charges were just made up, just for political, just to score some political points. So this remains a concern because there is some valid argument here that central agencies, law enforcement agencies, have often been misused by ruling parties to target opposition leaders. We have seen this happening repeatedly with CBI, and of late we have seen this happening with Enforcement Directorate. Of course, there are two sides to this story again. So let's not sit in judgment of what's the right argument. Of course, there's no right argument here. It's up to the courts to decide, let's say in the Arvind Kejriwal case, to decide whether he's guilty of the charges in the excise policy scam. And it's up to ED to bring up the right evidence, right? And to build the case against Arvind Kejriwal. So it's not just about one case or one politician or one particular incident. It's about the general feeling that central agencies are misused often by ruling parties to target the opposition. So this has always been a concern. It points to the politicization of our law enforcement agencies. The Supreme Court has repeatedly raised concerns about this, particularly with regard to the CBI and how it has been functioning, right? So that is something you should be aware of. Next, on page number 9, we have a very interesting article related to man-animal conflict in the state of Kerala. So I feel it's a very important topic for your mains, even for a possible essay topic. There can be an entire essay asked on man-animal conflict. So this is something which has become very common of late in India, particularly in some states like Kerala, Uttarakhand, and in some other states. In Kerala, recently there have been many incidents where elephants especially have completely gone on a rampage, destroying property. Many people have been injured and killed as well. And it's not just elephants. There are other wild animals as well, from tigers to leopards to many others, which have increased the incidence of man-animal conflict. Of course, here the blame is not on the animal at all, right? It's we humans who have ventured into their habitat, their territory. Over the decades, we have destroyed the natural wild habitats, and increasing urbanization, unsustainable agriculture, deforestation, unsustainable tourism is what brings humans in closer contact with wildlife. There is a reduction in the availability of food for them. It pushes the animals to enter human habitats as well, leading to these incidents of man-animal conflict. In fact, in Kerala, it has become so serious that many people have lost their lives due to man-animal conflict incidents, especially between tigers and humans and elephants and humans. So that is why the state recently declared man-animal conflict as a state-specific disaster. Please make a note of this. This is very important. States have the authority to declare a state-specific disaster under the Disaster Management Act. Under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, the State Disaster Management Authority, which is headed by the Chief Minister, can notify any disaster as a state-specific disaster. This will give some extraordinary powers to the state government and the government officials. They can override other existing laws and use the extraordinary powers to manage and contain the situation. For example, Odisha had declared snake bites as a state-specific disaster. Odisha also declared lightning incidents as a state-specific disaster because the central government was not considering lightning as a disaster, right? The center can notify these national disasters, but states also have the authority to designate few state-specific disasters within that particular state. So when that is notified, the state officials, the state bureaucracy will get few special powers through which they can override other existing laws, and they can use the special powers to contain the situation, the disaster-like situation which has developed in a state. They can channel more funds and use the authority to restrict activities, human activities and economic activities to deal with the particular situation which has arisen. So Kerala has become the first state in India to declare man-animal conflict as a disaster. It has notified it as a state-specific disaster. So let's quickly examine what reasons are contributing to increased incidents of man-animal conflict in Kerala. This, of course, applies for rest of India as well. The primary reason is habitat destruction. The constant degeneration of the wild habitat, increasing deforestation as a result of large-scale unplanned urbanization. We have large-scale industrial development going on, large-scale infrastructure projects being taken up, from road to railway projects to power projects. All these projects, all this expansion of human activities will result in deforestation. It will destroy the natural habitats, and this is one of the prime reasons why we are witnessing more frequent man-animal conflict incidents. Apart from that, hydrology of the forests has been compromised, meaning water flow within a forest. The rivers, the lakes, and the watering holes that are present within a forest, they have been compromised, again due to mismanagement and unsustainable human development. We have obstructed the flow of certain rivers, right? Unplanned development has led to blockage of the drainage channels. Several lakes and ponds and natural watering holes, they have started becoming dry, especially during summer season. And thus, there isn't enough water within the forests. So due to the lack of water within forests, the animals try to venture out. They try to move out to the fringe areas on the boundaries of the forest, and they come in contact with human habitation. So the moment they see the presence of water near human habitation, they will venture out. They will take the risk, because that's the only option that we have left them with. So degeneration and deforestation of forests and habitats, destruction of the hydrology of forests, and also the impact of floods in Kerala. Kerala has repeatedly been hit by monsoon floods in 2018, 2019, and almost every year. There has been devastating floods, which again is a result of large-scale destruction of the forests and the wetlands, and as well as the natural ecosystems and buffers. There has been rampant urbanization. There has been unsustainable tourism. Like several resorts have come up in forest areas. The proliferation of these homestays and resorts also brings humans into closer contact with animals. It has led to larger destruction of the habitat. The prey base for wild animals and general availability of food has declined due to all these factors. Of course, hunting is also a challenge, hunting and poaching. In the long term, climate change is also a concern. The very vegetation structure in our forests has been changing due to the introduction of invasive alien species. Certain species of plants and trees that don't belong to that habitat, to that ecosystem, which have come in from the outside, right? And if they are invasive, if they can take over the entire ecosystem, they can destroy the natural vegetation and the vegetation structure. So for example, in the case of elephants, they are not getting enough plant material to eat because the edible plant and trees have largely been destroyed due to the explosive growth of certain invasive alien plants. These foreign plant and tree species which have invaded into these ecosystems, they have taken over the entire vegetation. So due to the shortage of food availability, elephants are forced to move out and look out for food in other areas. The same happens with the predators as well, like tigers and leopards. There has been a significant reduction in the prey base, right? Because the animals that they prey upon, they don't have enough grass, enough plant to eat, because there is a rise in invasive non-edible plants. Plants which are not consumed by the animals have exploded. Most of them are alien species from outside of the ecosystem, and the natural vegetation in that ecosystem has been destroyed. So in all the factors, you can see that there is human involvement. It's primarily anthropogenic factors which are contributing to this crisis. So what can be done? What can be the solution for man-animal conflict? Let's take a look at this. One is to improve the quality of our forests, focus more on afforestation, protect the forest areas, especially the core habitats and the buffer zones. They have to be protected to ensure that the quality of the forests improve. This is the home of the wildlife, right? It's we humans who have entered their homes. We need to put a stop to this. This can be done with better planning and efficient forest management. With efficient forest management practices, we can manage man-animal conflict situations. It just requires better policies and better implementation. So improving the quality of the forest can play a very significant role. For example, right now most habitats are heavily fragmented, meaning there are many projects, many human activities that divide the forest into different fragments. Like let's say we build a road right through a forest area. If you've gone through, let's say Wayanad and the nearby protected areas, including Dnipro in Karnataka, Mudumalai in Tamil Nadu, they're all part of the same Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. There are important highways, interstate highways running across these protected habitats. So there is constant traffic, there is constant movement of vehicles and people, which basically has not only disturbed the wildlife, but it has prevented them from moving from one place to another. Now let's say elephants in Wayanad, right? They may not have enough food and water during summer, but if they are able to freely migrate to, let's say, Karnataka or Tamil Nadu, they might have found food and water, and they won't be pushed to come towards human habitations. But we have destroyed the forests. We have fragmented, divided the forests. There are interstate borders, roads, power lines, bridges, right? Everything that divides the projects, the forests. We call them linear projects, like high tension power cables, roads, any such project which is just cutting across a forest, right? These are straight linear projects. They divide the habitat, they fragment the forests and prevents the migration, the movement of the animals. So this indeed is a major concern. This is something which can be tackled with better planning. These are long-term solutions. Then more importantly, the State Forest Department, along with the help of center and voluntary organizations, they have to work with the local communities. They play a critical role in conservation efforts. The local village communities present on the fringes of the forest area and the tribal, forest-dwelling tribal communities, their help and assistance is crucial because they are the ones who are suffering from the losses. Let's say elephant damages a property or let's say crops, right? Or let's say a tiger enters a village and takes away the cattle or attacks a human being, right? All these losses are borne by the local communities, the tribal communities. So sometimes if the government is not addressing this, these local communities might build resentment against the animals, against the forests, and they might start attacking the animals. There have been instances where animals have been poisoned by local community members because they were frustrated with the man-animal conflict incidents. They might try to hunt those animals down, thus posing a threat to wildlife. Plus, they will face arrest as well because any such killing of animals is prohibited under Wildlife Protection Act. So it's important to spread awareness within the local community and involve them in the conservation effort. At the panchayat level, right from the Gram Panchayat to the Zilla Panchayat, the forest departments, the state government and the center, they have to work collectively with NGOs and environmental groups to spread awareness amongst local community members and involve them in the conservation efforts. We need to replant the indigenous species, right? Mainly to counter the impact of invasive alien species. As I told you, edible plants have gone down in some of our native forest ecosystems. So we have to counter these alien species by planting more indigenous variety of plants and trees which produce these edible leaves, which is relied upon by the herbivores. If you have enough food and plant material available for the herbivores, the omnivores, the predators will have a large enough prey base. So this food chain has to be fixed. There is an imbalance in the food chain itself, and this has to be fixed by planting indigenous species. And maybe we can do this with the help of schemes like Manrega. The local community members can be given the work. They can be paid for it as well. They will get some income out of it. And by taking their help, we can replant the indigenous species to increase the vegetation cover, the forest cover, and to counter the invasive alien species. And finally, we have to ensure adequate and immediate compensation is paid to the affected people. If someone has been injured or lost their lives, if they've lost their cattle or their crops, their house, right, or their vehicles if they are damaged by wild animals, they have to be compensated immediately by the state. Without compensation, right, it creates resentment amongst the people. The local community members, tribal members, they will hate the government. And they will start breeding resentment against the wild animals as well. So they might take matters into their own hands, and they might attack the animals, or they might even promote disaffection against the government, as we have seen in Naxal areas, for example. So providing immediate and effective compensation is very, very important to compensate the affected people for their losses. So these are some steps that need to be followed, and one needs to be aware of this because you can get a question, a direct question based on this. Next, on page number 7 and 10, we have two important columns that talk about Indian workers and the difficulties that they are facing abroad. We have this article that deals with Indian youth who were misled, and they were in a way forced to join the Russian army as helpers and logistic providers. And eventually they were pushed into Ukraine, into the battlefield, and more than 100 Indian youth had fallen prey to this nexus which existed between Russian army officials and middlemen. Several human trafficking agents and middlemen, they had colluded with Russian defense ministry and the army, and they were recruiting youth from these developing and poor countries, and they were signing them up for fighting the war in Ukraine without their knowledge. Unfortunately, 2 Indians have been killed. One from Karnataka and another Indian, they have been killed in Ukraine, right? And this is a foreign war which has nothing to do with India. But Indian youth are being trapped, they are being duped, they are being misled by the middlemen involved, by certain YouTube channels, and they are pushing them in the name of a lucrative job to take up this employment with Russian army. And after they reach Russia, they realize that they are duped. But after that, it's too late. They are pushed into the front lines without any proper military training, and many of them have got injured, and 2 of them have been killed. There's a similar article here in another page on page 10 that talks about India's unskilled and semi-skilled laborers who often find work opportunities in the Gulf, in West Asia, from Saudi Arabia to UAE to Bahrain, right? Across these West Asian countries, you have a very large Indian diaspora community, right? Indians from different states like Kerala, Bihar, then Telangana, they all look for these opportunities in West Asia, and even they are facing many, many problems. So these articles are exploring the human angle, the human story behind it, and this topic is actually very important for international relations. Because as part of our syllabus, we have to be aware of the challenges and problems being faced by the Indian diaspora abroad, especially how Indian workers who are not so well educated, right, who take up these blue-collar jobs, who are semi-skilled or unskilled, they are at a bigger risk. India's semi-skilled and unskilled workers who are seeking blue-collared jobs. See, we have blue-collared and white-collared jobs. White-collared jobs refers to professional jobs like software engineer, doctor, right, lawyer. Those who have very high qualification, high skills, they seek white-collar employment, which are high-paying jobs. So they go through the regular visa immigration process. It's easier for those with higher skills, higher education to get good jobs in other countries. But the concern is about blue-collared workers, right, who take up these manual tasks. They usually take up daily wage employment. They barely have basic education. They are semi-educated. The skill set is also very limited. They are semi-skilled or unskilled. So they have very little awareness. They don't even know how to get a passport. They're not sure about the work opportunities available. They always rely on middlemen. They rely heavily on the middle agents to help them. They pay them a lot of money to get their passports, to get their jobs, to get their visas, right? They trust them, they put their faith on them, hoping that they will get them a job abroad. Because in India, they may not be finding enough opportunities. So they look at lucrative opportunities abroad. And also this is about pursuing this foreign dream, right? Building a better life for themselves, improving their standard of living for them and their family. So this is quite lucrative for many Indians in several parts of the country. If you just talk about the Gulf region, the West Asia region, we have almost 10 million plus Indians residing and working in the Gulf countries alone. I'm just talking about the Gulf nations. If I include the whole West Asia, North Africa as well, the number crosses 15 million. That is the kind of number of Indians who are residing and working here. We have almost 3 million plus in UAE, 3 million plus in Saudi Arabia, right? Almost 6 lakh people in Bahrain. In fact, the Indian diaspora in Bahrain is almost half the population of the country. That's how big the Indian community is in some of these West Asian countries. They have become the backbone of the economy of these countries. Most of them, they find jobs in hospitality industry or in construction and in real estate, right? They work as manual laborers, as construction workers. They also find employment in the oil sector, oil and gas industry of the Gulf region. So, in short, Indian workers are the backbone of the Gulf economies. But however, they run into many problems, many challenges. Quite often, they are duped by the middleman itself. They take large sums of money from them, promise them jobs, but they usually send them through illegal routes, either by getting them fake documents, or sometimes they promise a job which is not existing in the country, right? So either ways, they run into a lot of troubles, a lot of problems. And some of the Indians, they might get accused of committing crimes as well. They might be in breach of the visa and immigration laws of that country, right? They might be seen as an illegal migrant. They might be misused by the middlemen to smuggle illegal substances, including drugs, right? Or some workers, when you have such a large community, they might actually commit some crimes, from theft to even murder. Or sometimes they are falsely accused and jailed. And the problem here is that in Gulf countries, the laws are very strict, right? Because these are conservative, authoritarian monarchies, and they have some very outdated laws which could affect the well-being of the Indian community. So it becomes the responsibility of the Indian government to take care of the well-being of the Indian diaspora, right? To provide them legal support, to ensure that Indian consulars who are stationed in Indian embassies and consulates, they reach out and provide legal aid to them. We also have signed transfer agreements, prisoner swap or transfer agreements. So those who are convicted of offenses in these countries, they can be brought to India and they can serve the remainder of the jail sentence in Indian jails instead of them languishing in a foreign jail, so that at least they can be closer to their families here. Recently, when 8 former Indian naval officers were accused of espionage in Qatar, right? India was thinking about this idea before securing their release, that we will propose the transfer of the prisoners so that they can come to India, serve the sentence here in India, right? But eventually India succeeded in convincing Qatar and all of them were released and sent back to India. But not everyone gets the same kind of support, right? Especially semi-skilled, unskilled workers, they have no diplomatic or political support backing them, and many of them languish in jails and they are duped by their employers as well. They are abused by their employers as well. There have been cases where employers, they snatch the passports, they don't pay them adequate salaries, they don't give them good living conditions. They push hundreds of people to live in small apartments, right? Sometimes they have resorted to physical abuse. There have been cases where women workers have been targeted. They have suffered from sexual molestation, rapes, etc. There are cases where Indian men, sometimes they marry women from their villages just to take them to the Gulf and sell them to trafficking rings, to push them into prostitution. So all such abusive practices have taken place where Indian workers have been quite severely affected in the Gulf. And now we are facing a situation in Russia where Indian youth are being duped to fight this foreign war without their knowledge. Again, it's middlemen and certain social media channels and YouTube channels which are misleading the youth, promising jobs that pay them 1 lakh, 2 lakh rupees a month. They get attracted by it, right? They sign these documents and they travel to Russia thinking it's a regular job. But once they reach Russia, they're pushed to the front lines of the battlefield, and without any training, without any awareness, they are pushed into this war, and a couple of Indians have lost their lives as well. So these issues that Indian workers are facing abroad, especially in the Gulf and also with regard to Russia-Ukraine war, they represent some of the biggest challenges being faced by Indian migrant workers community. Right? So this is a diplomatic challenge for India as well. India has to work with these countries to safeguard the interests of the Indian community, to ensure that they're not misled, they're not duped, and no one exploits them. Ensuring that is a big task for the Indian government and the Indian missions present in all these countries. So that is something we should be mindful of. The topic can be very important and useful under international relations. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles in today's newspaper. Now let's take a quick look at the prelims section. On page number 11, we have an article that's related to India's search for critical minerals. There are certain critical minerals which are of great strategic significance, especially minerals like lithium, cobalt, etc. Given that the world is transitioning towards electric vehicles, batteries will become very, very important, and most batteries today are based on lithium cobalt structure, right? So these are critical minerals. They are present in very few countries. It's a limited resource. Not every country is blessed with lithium, cobalt, nickel, and all the other critical minerals mentioned here. So these critical minerals, they have a lot of value in electronics industry, semiconductor industry, in the battery industry, also in automobiles, aerospace, defense, to build rockets and missiles as well. They have a lot of strategic significance as well. So all such minerals are classified as critical strategic minerals, and it includes some rare earth elements as well, rare earth minerals as well. So in this regard, India is not very blessed. We do have a few critical strategic minerals and some rare earth elements, but the reserves are very limited. So as of now, we are heavily dependent on imports, especially China. China controls the supply chain of most of the critical minerals and strategic minerals. Now, this is something India wants to end. We don't want to have such kind of dependency on China, which has been aggressive with India, right? We are having a hostile relationship right now as a result of the border tensions. So India wants to cut down this dependency on China and shift to other countries. For example, Australia. Australia is a reliable supplier of lithium. Recently, we have struck deals with the Australian government to secure few lithium blocks that can be exclusively used for importing into India. And now India has said, the mines ministry has said that India will focus on African countries as well. Africa is blessed with some of the critical minerals, and Africa will be a focus for India to source these minerals. Then you also have South America. In South America, you have the lithium triangle, which contains the world's largest reserve of lithium. So India is building close ties with all the three lithium triangle countries. Now please tell me in the comments, which are these lithium triangle countries? Which are these three South American countries that are considered to be part of lithium triangle? India is signing agreements with these three lithium triangle countries to source lithium from South America as well. Essentially, the idea is to move away from our dependency on China and to source from other countries. Plus, we are focusing on our domestic resources as well. Recently, it was reported that lithium reserves have been found in Kashmir. So India is further exploring this opportunity. If it's viable, we will go for commercial exploitation of lithium in Kashmir as well and in other parts of India. Even in Rajasthan, it was reported that few lithium blocks have been found. But we are yet to evaluate the viability of such exploration. So whatever is possible domestically, we'll try to explore that. But India has very limited reserves as of now. So we have to continue depending on imports. Because tomorrow, if you want to decarbonize the economy, if you have to move away from fossil fuels and switch to electric vehicles, these minerals are going to be critical, right? Especially for sourcing cobalt, Africa can be a great source. For lithium, Australia and South America can be a great source. And this can reduce our dependency on China. So that is what the article is talking about. So please go through this table. You can get prelims questions based on this. Be familiar with these critical minerals and from which countries are we sourcing it. Also take a look at the distribution of these critical minerals around the world. Which countries have the highest reserves of these critical strategic minerals? So please be familiar with these basic facts. Next, on page 12, we have a development with regard to India-Maldives relations. As you know, India's ties with Maldives has taken a hit because of President Mohammad Muizzu, who won the elections last year. He won the elections largely based on the anti-India campaign, which has been called India Out campaign. Mohammad Muizzu has been seen as a pro-China leader. He has quite openly opposed India's presence. He has even ordered India to withdraw all the military troops and equipment that we had stationed in Maldives. He first paid a visit to Turkey, signed some military contracts with Turkey for procuring drones, then visited China and has taken a lot of investments and military support from China as well. Plus, he has quite openly opposed India and India's presence, and his ministers also have taken quite an open position against India. So, at a time when India's ties with Maldives has been ruptured, right? Very interesting development has come up. Maldives is also facing an economic challenge, right? It's taken a lot of loans from other countries and now it's struggling to repay the loans. And India is one amongst the countries which has given a lot of loans to Maldives. So now Mohammad Muizzu has been asking India to help the country to deal with the $400 million debt that it owes to India. See, this is not the first time it's happening. Maldives being a small economy, it largely depends on tourism for revenue and fisheries. Apart from that, it doesn't have other sources of revenue. So its economy has faced many challenges in the past as well. And every time it was India that was helping Maldives, right? We had many friendly governments and leaders in Maldives, like Mohammad Gayoom, Mohammad Nasheed. They were all great friends of India, and India-Maldives enjoyed one of the best relationships possible. It was disrupted by Mohammad Muizzu and one of his predecessors, Yamin Gayoom. Apart from these two anti-China leaders, anti-India leaders, Maldives in general has been very close to India, and India actually had helped Maldives financially. We had set up a standby credit facility. India had established a standby credit facility through the Reserve Bank of India, through the RBI, and $100 million was readily available for Maldives whenever it faced a liquidity problem. Given that it had a very limited small economy, every now and then Maldives would face a liquidity crisis, right? It would run out of foreign exchange reserves or its debt burden would increase. So to help out Maldives in these situations, we have a permanent facility which has been created, a standby credit facility run by the RBI, where $100 million is made readily available to Maldives. So this is the kind of financial support we had been giving to the country. So now, Mohammad Muizzu has approached India asking for India's help to deal with the $400 million debt that it owes to India. So basically, Mohammad Muizzu is asking India to either restructure the debt, to defer the payments, and maybe they're asking to withdraw some amount from the standby credit facility as well. So that shows that Maldives cannot do without India's support and assistance. Also, this could be an opportunity for India to repair the damage in the relations and rebuild the relationship, which could help us counter the Chinese influence. So this is something you should take note of. Next, on the same page, we have another article referring to a major development in the Russia-Ukraine war. Russia, in the last couple of days, has launched major assault against Ukraine's infrastructure. Especially, Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been targeted with devastating attacks by Russia. Russia has fired more than 100 missiles and drones. It has procured these kamikaze drones or suicide drones from Iran. And along with that, several missiles. In total, more than 100 missiles and drones have been launched by Russia to target the energy infrastructure of Ukraine. And in particular, a very important dam and hydropower plant has been hit. In this image, you can see the Dnipro hydroelectric power plant, which is the largest hydroelectric power plant in Ukraine. So Russia has targeted the critical energy installations, and Ukrainian president has called it energy terrorism. Because Russia is trying to cripple Ukraine by disrupting its electricity supply. So large parts of Ukraine, they have lost electricity supply because of these devastating attacks, especially on the Dnipro hydroelectric power plant. So Ukraine's leader has called this energy terrorism by Russia, and you should know where this hydroelectric power plant is located. So there could be a map-based question, right? In fact, Dnipro is the most important river in Ukraine. It flows from North Ukraine all the way to South Ukraine and drains here into Black Sea. There are many major dams that Ukraine has built on this river, and there are important hydropower plants as well. So if you look at the map here, this is where the Dnipro dam and hydroelectric plant is located in the city of Zaporozhye. So this is where Russia has carried out major strikes. This is the largest hydroelectric plant of Ukraine, right? Now you might have heard of Zaporozhye because this is the city where a nuclear power plant is also located, the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. When the war began 2 years ago, there were risks about a nuclear accident occurring due to the war at Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. So in the same city, you have the Dnipro dam built on the river, and you have a hydroelectric plant here, which is the largest hydroelectric plant in Ukraine. So Russia has deliberately hit the hydroelectric plant and few other energy infrastructure facilities to disrupt electricity supply, and Ukraine is calling this energy terrorism. In fact, this is not the first time that Russia is targeting Ukraine's infrastructure. Even before the war, since 2014, Russia has been launching cyber attacks as well by using computer malwares such as Petya and NotPetya. These were ransomware attacks. Russia's cyber defense agencies were working with few non-state cyber groups, and they had launched a cyber war on Ukraine since 2014. They used these computer malwares called ransomwares, such as Petya and NotPetya, to target Ukraine's banks, Ukraine's water and public services, electricity services, and even bus services, to disrupt public infrastructure to punish Ukraine's economy. So this again is an aspect of the modern day warfare. Imposing economic costs, targeting energy infrastructure and public infrastructure becomes a strategy in warfare. Next, on the same page, we have an article referring to AUKUS. Australia and UK are looking to step up their cooperation under AUKUS initiative. So what is AUKUS? It's a trilateral initiative between Australia, United Kingdom, and the United States. These three countries announced this initiative in 2021, and under the initiative, UK and US are assisting Australia to build nuclear-powered submarines. Because Australia has a major disadvantage with regard to its maritime power in the Pacific. Here, China has become a threat. The Chinese Navy has expanded its reach and influence towards the South Pacific, where it is openly challenging Australia's military influence. So one drawback of Australia's Navy is that it doesn't have any nuclear-powered submarines. Right? Nuclear-powered submarines have a big advantage. They can remain underwater for a prolonged time. Is that clear? They don't essentially carry nuclear weapons. They are only powered by a nuclear reactor. So they don't have to come to the surface every few days to recharge the batteries. They can remain underwater for several months. They can go on these long-range missions, and that will help any navy to dominate the waters around the country. So UK and US promised this military cooperation and defense technology cooperation under AUKUS initiative, where they are transferring nuclear submarine technology. They are not transferring nuclear weapons. Please don't get confused. Nuclear weapons is not part of the deal. They are only helping Australia in building its own nuclear-powered submarine. The submarines will be powered by a nuclear reactor, but it will carry conventional weapons, not nuclear weapons. The idea is to help Australia to counter the Chinese aggression in the region. So this is the AUKUS initiative, and according to the article, Australia, Britain are accelerating their cooperation. They want to fast-track the assistance so that Australia can quickly build and deploy its own nuclear-powered submarines. Next, we have another important article related to the Gaza war. at the UN Security Council, the US has been pushing for a ceasefire. Given the humanitarian situation that has developed, right? Because 32,000 plus Palestinians have been killed by Israel, which has led to even charges of genocide against Israel. So the US was pushing for a ceasefire during the holy month of Ramadan to give some reprieve for the Palestinian people. But however, this ceasefire resolution has been defeated by Russia and China. Now, this is quite surprising. Russia, China, usually they are on the side of Palestinians, right? So why would Russia, China use their veto to defeat the resolution at the UNSC if US was pushing for a ceasefire? The reason why they have defeated the resolution is because the US was linking the ceasefire with the release of the hostages that Hamas has been holding since last year's deadly terror attack that Hamas carried out. On October 7, 2023, hundreds of Hamas terrorists, they infiltrated into Israel, killed 1,200, 1,300 Israelis, and they have taken hundreds of Israelis as hostages. These are innocent Israeli civilians who have been held hostage. So Israel's one condition is that all hostages have to be released by Hamas. So US had included this as part of the resolution, that if Hamas gives up all the hostages and sends them back safely to Israel, right, whoever is alive, right, because some hostages have been killed already. So if the remaining hostages are sent back, then US was pushing Israel through UNSC to call for an immediate ceasefire, right? It seemed like a fair deal. Obviously, the lives of hostages matter as well, as much as the lives of Palestinians. But Russia and China, which use the veto to play their own geopolitical game, they have defeated the resolution because the ceasefire call was tied with the release of hostages. This again shows the geopolitics played at UN Security Council. It's not just Russia, China, even the other permanent members, US, UK, France, they are all known to use their veto to play their own geopolitical games. This again brings into question the effectiveness of UN and how veto is often misused by the P5 countries, the 5 permanent members. Instead of working in the interests of humanity, they often pursue their own geopolitical interests, right? This resolution probably could have helped in bringing out a ceasefire, right? And it fairly proposed an exchange of hostages as well. But Russia, China don't agree with the position. They just want an immediate ceasefire. They want the war to come to a halt, right? Without any conditions on release of hostages. This, of course, is not acceptable to Israel. It's not acceptable to US. So it has divided the members at the UNSC and the resolution has been defeated. Coming to the last article, on page 13, we have an article related to environment and ecology. The article is referring to something called as Keystone species. Keystone species and how they play an important role in the environment. The article is talking about the coastline of Finland and how marine biodiversity is getting affected, coastal biodiversity is getting affected due to the depleting numbers of the keystone species. For example, keystone species like bladder wrack, eel grass, and the blue mussel, which are considered as keystone species along the coastline of Finland, their numbers have been depleting, right? That's what the article is talking about. So this affects the whole food chain, the food webs get affected if keystone species are declining in their numbers. So first, we should understand what is keystone species. It's a very important concept in environment ecology, right? See, the term keystone is actually taken from architecture. In architecture, you might have seen these arched gateways that are built, right? So here, there is no support. There is no additional pillars or support given in the middle, but still the arch will hold itself, right? The arch is holding itself independently. How is this possible? This is possible because of one critical stone, which is the keystone present here. You can find this in any archway, right? In any archway, you can see that there is no pillar, no additional support given, but the whole arch will hold itself independently because of the keystone present, the middle stone here. You remove this, the whole arch will collapse. So that is the critical role of a keystone. It is holding the arch together. You remove the keystone, the arch will fall. The same applies in the environment, in our ecosystems. In our ecosystems, there can be certain species which play a very big role in the ecosystem. Even if you take their number into account, their population size, compared to their smaller population, they will be having a disproportionate impact. Meaning they'll be having a higher impact on the ecosystem, on the food chain. If you look at the food chain here, the wolf represented in this food chain is a keystone species. It's like a keystone. It's holding the arch, it's holding the food chain, the food web together. As it feeds on various preys, it can prey on various animals. It keeps their population under check and plays a critical role in this particular food chain, and it acts as a keystone species. You take out the wolf, let's say the wolf goes extinct, this entire food chain might collapse. Is that clear? So such important species that are playing a disproportionate role in that ecosystem, in a particular food chain or a food web, they are called keystone species. Understood? So it's very important to protect such keystone species because the whole ecosystem, the whole food chain depends on them. So now give me examples of other similar keystone species. So the article is mentioning 3 of them, right? This is along the coastline of Finland. So depending on different countries, different regions and different habitats, certain keystone species have been identified. But of course, it's a disputed theory as well. There are other ecologists who don't agree with the concept of keystone species. They say that every organism has its own ecological niche. They play their own unique roles in the ecosystem. And we can't say that only one species is more important than the other. But there are many ecologists, many conservationists who agree with the theory of keystone species. So please read more about this, find out more examples, and mention that in the comments below. Focus more on India. Tell me what keystone species can you identify in the Indian context and mention that in the comments. So please take up these 2 questions for your answer writing practice. This will help you to revise the topic as well, and you can write your answers and post them in the comments. So with this, I conclude my discussion for today. I hope you guys have liked the session. If you did, please press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great weekend.